The first time the orphan girl stood on the white marble of the Cross Grand Hotel, she felt like the floor itself was judging her. It shone like ice under chandeliers, and every step echoed as if the building wanted her to leave. Her shoes were the problem. One heel was worn down, the stitching on the side had split, and a small flap of leather lifted each time she moved. She had tried to glue it the night before with a tube that smelled like gasoline, pressing it with her thumb until it went numb, but the tear had won anyway. A man in a tailored black suit looked at her feet and frowned, then looked up at her face like he couldn't decide which part offended him more. She swallowed and held tighter to the folder against her chest, the one holding her scholarship invitation and the only clean copy of her essay. Then the billionaire came in. Damian Cross didn't walk so much as arrive, surrounded by quiet people who moved like trained shadows. His coat was charcoal wool, his watch flashed once, and his eyes slid over the lobby like it belonged to him in the way air belongs to lungs. He was already smiling for someone, already winning without trying. The orphan girl, Lila Hart, took one step back to make room, and her torn shoe made a soft, humiliating sound against the marble. It was tiny, almost nothing. Damian heard it anyway. He turned, his gaze dropping, and his mouth twisted as if he'd found something funny at the bottom of his glass. "Are those falling apart?" he said, loud enough that the nearest guests paused. Heat rushed up Lila's neck. A woman in pearls covered her mouth with her hand, not to hide sympathy but to hide a laugh. Damian leaned a fraction closer, like he was inspecting damage on a car he might buy. "This is a charity gala, not a thrift store aisle," he said. "Did no one tell you there's a dress code?" Lila's fingers squeezed her folder until the edges bent. She wanted to say she wasn't here to eat the canapes. She was here because the letter in her bag promised a chance at school, a chance to stop counting pennies like they were breaths. But her voice stuck. Would anyone even hear it over his? And why did it matter so much to him that an orphan girl's shoes were torn? She opened her mouth anyway. "I'm a finalist," she managed, "for the Cross Future Scholars." Damian's eyebrows rose. The laugh that left him wasn't loud, but it was sharp, and it made the lobby feel colder. "A finalist," he repeated, as if tasting the words and finding them cheap. "That's adorable." He looked around at the polished people watching. "This is what we're funding now." The security guard shifted, uncertain whether to protect her or protect the brand. Lila's stomach folded in on itself, and she told herself not to cry, not here, not in front of people who treated tears like entertainment. Then her phone rang. The sound was ordinary, a thin chime from a cracked screen, completely wrong in that lobby full of hushed wealth. Everyone noticed because Lila flinched, as if she'd been slapped. She fumbled, embarrassed, and saw the caller ID, unknown number. Her first thought was the shelter. Her second thought was that the shelter only called when something was wrong. She answered too quickly. "Hello?" A calm man's voice came through, steady as paper. "Ms. Lila Hart?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered, suddenly aware Damian was watching her mouth. "This is Reed Lawson," the voice said, "attorney of record for the Elias Cross estate. I need you to listen carefully. We have been trying to reach you for a long time." The words hit the air like a dropped glass. Damian's smile vanished so fast it was like someone had turned off a light. The billionaire's face went still, and in that stillness something raw showed through, fear or shock or recognition she didn't understand. Why would the estate of Elias Cross, the dead founder whose portrait hung in the hotel hallway, be calling an orphan girl with torn shoes? And why did Damian look like he'd just heard his own name spoken at a funeral? Lila's throat tightened. I don't know what you mean," she said. Reed's voice didn't change. "It means your name is in sealed documents," he replied. "It means you are not here by accident. Where are you right now?" Lila glanced at Damian without meaning to. His hand had lifted, palm out, as if he could stop the call by stopping the air. That answered one question immediately. Damian knew exactly who Reed Lawson was. "Give me the phone," Damian said quietly, and it was the first time he had spoken without mockery. It sounded like an order someone could get hurt ignoring. Lila backed up on instinct, the marble cold through the thin soles of her ruined shoes, and the security guard stepped closer as Damian's fingers reached toward her cracked screen. Back at St. Bridget's shelter, the smell of bleach never really left your hair. Even when Lila lay on her narrow bed at night, she could still taste it, mixed with the cheap soap and the damp wool of too many coats drying on the same line. The shelter was not cruel, but it was crowded, and crowded places had their own kind of hunger. People ate fast, people hid things, people learned to smile without showing what they needed. Lila had been an orphan girl since she was 7, old enough to remember the sound of her mother's laughter, but not old enough to remember her mother's face without forcing it. All she had left was a thin silver pendant on a chain, scratched from years of being clutched like a prayer. She had no birth certificate she could find, no aunt who sent birthday cards, no one who could sign the forms that asked for parent or guardian. She had learned to fill that space with work. Before school, she washed dishes at a diner where the plates were always hot, and the manager's voice was always sharper than the knives. After school, she helped at the shelter, sorting donated clothes, reading to the younger kids, and sometimes sitting with a boy named Ben when his asthma made him scared to fall asleep. Ben was 11 and pretended he didn't need anyone, but he still checked if Lila was there before he closed his eyes. That was who she protected. Not the idea of herself, but the small, fragile lives around her. So when her shoe tore last week, she didn't replace it. She used the money for Ben's inhaler refill instead, because the pharmacy didn't accept good intentions. That answered the first question anyone had asked about those shoes. They weren't torn because she was careless. They were torn because she chose someone else's breathing over her own pride. The second question was harder. Why didn't she tell anyone? Why didn't she ask for help? Because in shelters, asking could cost you. People gave, but they also judged, and Lila was tired of being seen as a problem to solve instead of a person. The scholarship letter had arrived folded inside a plain envelope, slipped under the shelter office door like a secret. Cross Future Scholars, it said, and her hands shook as she read the words over and over. Tuition, housing, a stipend, a path that didn't end in the diner forever. She had cried that night without sound, the way you cry when you've learned not to disturb anyone. But the next day, life tested her in a smaller, quieter way. On her bus ride to school, she found a wallet wedged under a seat, fat with cash and cards that looked like shiny knives. A name was embossed in gold, Serena Vale. Lila knew that name because Serena was everywhere online, smiling beside luxury cars, raising champagne glasses beside charitable hashtags. The amount of money inside the wallet could have bought Lila new shoes, could have paid the shelter's overdue electric bill, could have fixed the broken window in Ben's room that whistled at night. Her fingers hovered over the bills, and for a moment she imagined the relief on the shelter director's face. Would anyone even miss it? Would a rich person feel the gap the way she would? That was the first moral choice that cost her something. She got off at the next stop, walked 2 blocks out of her way, and turned the wallet in at a concierge desk of a boutique gym whose lobby smelled like citrus and expensive deodorant. The receptionist blinked at her torn shoes and then at the cash, suspicious. "You sure?" the woman asked. Lila's voice came out small. "It's not mine," she said. The receptionist called a manager. A man in a suit came out, too smooth, too careful, and he thanked her like he was checking a box. As Lila turned to leave, she noticed an older woman sitting on a bench nearby, hands folded, watching her with a strange focus. The woman's hair was silver, her coat plain but high quality, and her eyes held no pity, only attention. Someone was observing, measuring, remembering. Did that woman matter, or was she just another rich stranger, amused by an orphan girl's honesty? Lila didn't know. What she did know was that when she returned to the shelter that evening, the director was holding a second envelope. "This came for you," she said slowly, and her expression was cautious, as if mail could be dangerous. Inside was a printed confirmation. Her scholarship interview would be held at the Cross Grand Hotel during the gala. Lila's heart lifted and then dropped when she read the requirement line at the bottom. Finalists must provide a parent or legal guardian signature upon entry. Her hand went cold around the paper. How was an orphan girl supposed to bring a guardian she didn't have? And if she couldn't, did that mean the door would close before she even got to knock? Lila stared at the signature box until the ink blurred, then folded the letter carefully and made a decision that scared her more than Damian Cross ever could. She would go anyway, even if it meant walking into a place built to reject her, because the worst kind of poverty was giving up before you were pushed. Cross Tower looked like it had been carved out of the sky and dropped into the city. The glass reflected everything, except the people at the bottom. When Lila reached the hotel for her interview, the air outside was sharp with winter, smelling of exhaust and roasted chestnuts from a street cart across the road. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished wood, and perfume so expensive it might as well have been armor. Her shoes squeaked against the marble. Her stomach squeaked too, in a way nobody could hear but her. She tried to hold her head high to make her shoulders look like they belonged here. The check-in table was draped in black cloth, and the volunteer scanning invitations barely glanced at her until his eyes dropped to the signature line. "Guardian signature," he said, already turning his head toward the next person. "I don't have one," Lila replied. "I'm an orphan." The word landed awkwardly in that place like a coin in a crystal bowl. The volunteer's mouth tightened. "Then you can't enter," he said. The first open question burned in her mind. Was the scholarship real, or was it built with hidden traps designed to filter out people like her? She could have turned around. She almost did. Then she heard laughter near the entrance, bright and cruel, and saw Serena Vale glide in, wearing a dress that shimmered like oil on water. Serena's gaze flicked to Lila's shoes, then to her face, and her smile widened like she'd found a new toy. "Oh my God," Serena said, pulling out her phone. "Is this a protest? Is this performance art? Because if it is, it's tragically underfunded." A few people chuckled. Lila felt her cheeks burn. Serena's camera tilted downward, capturing the torn flap of leather, the exposed thread. "Say hi," Serena said sweetly. "Tell my followers what brand those are." Lila's hands trembled around her folder, and she hated that her body reacted like that. Hated that her fear entertained them. That was the second question. Why did humiliation feel like something that belonged to the rich? Like a sport they got to play without consequences? Lila took a breath and lifted her chin. "Please," she said to the volunteer, voice shaking but present. "I was invited. My essay was accepted. Someone can confirm it." Serena made an exaggerated pout. "Oh, she thinks she belongs," she murmured. Then Damian Cross appeared, and the energy shifted like a tide. People straightened, smiles snapped into place. Lila saw him before he saw her, and a part of her wished she could become invisible, but Damian's eyes found her as if pulled by magnet. He looked at the volunteer's tablet, at the signature box, and then at Lila's shoes. The memory of his earlier mockery cut across her skin. He could have dismissed her with a flick. He could have let the rules crush her. Instead, he said, "Let her through." The volunteer blinked. Serena blinked harder. Lila blinked too, stunned. Why would Damian suddenly allow it? Was it guilt, or was it something darker? Some interest she didn't want? The answer came fast, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. Damian wasn't being kind, he was controlling the board. Inside, she was led to a waiting area, where other finalists sat in sleek clothes and stiff smiles, their parents beside them like shields. Lila sat alone. When her name was called, she walked into a room where the carpet swallowed sound. A panel of judges waited, faces neutral, pens ready. She spoke about her life in the shelter, about Ben's inhaler, about budgets and biology textbooks borrowed from the library, about how poverty didn't mean a lack of discipline. She didn't beg, she explained. Halfway through, she saw one judge, an older woman with silver hair, watching her with the same focused attention as the woman at the gym. The observer again. That answered another small question. Yes, someone had been noticing her choices. Lila finished her presentation, and for a heartbeat the room was quiet. Then a judge cleared his throat. "Your paperwork," he said. "There's an inconsistency in your records. Your birth registration doesn't match any state database." Lila's lungs tightened. "I don't have one," she said softly. "I was in foster systems that lost files." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Or," he said, "you fabricated your identity." The words stung worse than Damian's laughter. A guard stepped closer, as if she might run with a chandelier. Lila stood, terrified and furious. "I didn't fabricate myself," she whispered. "Because what else could you say when someone accused you of inventing your own existence?" The panel exchanged looks. "We need to pause your candidacy," the judge said, "until this is resolved." She walked out, feeling like the floor had tilted. In the hallway, she passed a framed photograph display celebrating the Cross Foundation's history. One image stopped her. It showed a ribbon cutting at an old brick building with a faded sign, Hart Children's Home. Standing beside the sign was Lila Cross, younger, smiling, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. The baby's tiny fist clutched something that flashed silver. Hair pendant, the same shape as the one on Lila's chain. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What was that home? Why did it carry her name? And why did the pendant in the photo look like it belonged to her? Before she could think, she raised her phone and snapped a picture. A hand clamped on her shoulder. "Miss," a security guard barked, "you need to come with me." Lila's stomach dropped as he reached for her folder, and she realized her small victory getting into the room had only made everything worse. The guard was already steering her toward a side corridor when Reed Lawson's voice cut through the air like a key turning in a lock. "Take your hand off her," the lawyer said, calm but hard. Reed was tall, gray at the temples, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen war rooms and wills. The guard hesitated. Damian Cross stepped into view at the end of the corridor, jaw tight, eyes sharp, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Reed didn't look at Damian with awe. He looked at him the way you look at a door you plan to open. "Mr. Cross," Reed said, "this young woman is under my counsel now." The guard loosened his grip. Lila's skin prickled. How could a stranger claim her like that? And why did Damian's face tighten as if Reed had spoken a forbidden name? Reed turned to Lila and lowered his voice. "Ms. Hart, you received my call in the lobby," he said. "Your phone ringing wasn't coincidence. Someone set it up to find you." Lila's mind spun. "Who?" she asked. Reed's eyes softened for the first time. "Lila Cross," he said, and the answer landed with weight. The first open question of this block rose in her chest. Why would a dead billionaire arrange a way to locate an orphan girl years later? Reed guided her into a smaller conference room, away from curious stares. He laid papers on the table with careful hands. "There is a sealed codicil," he said, "a legal addendum to Lila Cross's will. It references a child connected to Marion Hart and the Hart Children's Home. The document was sealed for safety reasons. It could not be opened until you were found and verified." Lila's mouth went dry. "Marion Hart," she repeated. "That was my mother's name." She had heard it once from an old social worker who thought she was asleep. Reed nodded. "Then you understand why I needed to reach you," he said. "Lila Cross funded that home. He visited. He protected certain records. He left instructions." Lila stared at the photograph on her phone, Elias holding the baby. The pendant. Her pendant. "Was he my father?" she asked before she could stop herself, the second open question bursting out like a sob. Reed didn't answer right away. That pause was its own kind of truth. "I can't state that as fact until verification is complete," he said finally. "But I can tell you this. You are named in the codicil. You are entitled to information and protections. That is why you were called." Lila's hands shook. It wasn't money that made her dizzy. It was the idea that her life had been connected to something larger without her knowledge, like living in a room with a hidden door. Damian spoke then, voice low, controlled. "This is outrageous," he said. "My father wouldn't—" Reed cut him off gently. "Your father did," he replied. Damian's eyes flashed, but something in his posture had shifted. The billionaire who mocked her shoes was gone, replaced by a man calculating the cost of a secret becoming public. Reed slid a letter across the table. The paper looked old, the ink slightly faded. "This was written by Elias," Reed said. "He instructed me to deliver it to you when we found you." Lila touched it like it might burn. She opened it and saw her name, Lila Hart, in careful handwriting. The first question answered itself in a painful, tender way. The dead man had arranged this because he wanted her found, not forgotten. Her vision blurred. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why not before?" Reed's jaw tightened. "Because someone interfered," he said, "and because the conditions of the seal required a certain age and a certain trigger." Lila glanced at her phone. "The ring," she said. Reed nodded. "Yes. Your number was attached to a dormant line. Someone called you today to activate contact." Damian's gaze snapped to the phone again, and Lila realized he wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of what she could unlock. Damian leaned forward, voice smooth in a way that didn't feel kind. "Ms. Hart," he said, "you don't understand what you're stepping into. The Cross Foundation is bigger than you. The media will tear you apart, and so will the people who think you're lying. Let me handle this quietly." "Quietly," Lila repeated. "You mean, pay me to disappear?" Damian didn't deny it. He only said, "I can offer you a settlement, education, housing, a fresh start. You never have to wear torn shoes again." For a second, the offer tempted her, not for herself, but for Ben, for the shelter. For every night she'd counted coins under a flickering bulb. Then she heard Serena's laughter in her memory and felt anger steady her spine. "I don't want your pity," Lila said. "I want the truth." Damian's eyes hardened. Reed's hand covered the letter as if to protect it. "We will proceed," Reed said, "and you will not intimidate her." Lila stood, heart pounding, and Reed escorted her out a side door so cameras wouldn't catch her face. Outside, the night air hit her like cold water, and the city's noise felt suddenly safer than the hotel's silence. She walked back to the shelter, clutching Elias's letter against her chest, still not fully believing it. But when she reached her room, she froze. The drawer where she kept her documents was pulled out and dumped. Her small savings tin lay open, empty, and her silver pendant chain was gone. On her pillow was a folded piece of paper with 3 words written in thick black marker: "Stop digging, orphan girl." Then from down the hall she heard Ben's voice call her name in a trembling whisper, and for the first time the danger felt real enough to taste. By morning, the shelter's hallway smelled like burnt toast and panic. Ben had come back. He hadn't been taken, not fully, but his eyes were wide and wet, and he kept rubbing his hands on his sweatshirt as if trying to erase something. "A lady," he said to Lila, voice small. "She had shiny nails and a coat that smelled like flowers. She asked if you wore a necklace. She said you were special. She gave me candy." Lila's stomach turned. Candy wasn't kindness when it came with questions. Lila pulled him into a hug, and his skinny arms clung tight, as if he'd felt the edge of something he couldn't name. The first question throbbed behind her ribs. Who had the power to walk into a shelter, charm a child, and leave a threat behind? The second question was worse. How far would they go if she didn't stop? The shelter director called Lila into the office, holding a stack of papers that shook in her hands. "We got this last night," the director said. "An eviction notice. And an inspection order. They're saying we're out of compliance, that we're a safety risk." The director's voice broke. "We don't have money for lawyers. Lila, I don't know what to do." Lila stared at the notice, at the official seals, at the cold wording that treated human lives like bad wiring. She could feel the trap tightening. If she fought for the truth about Elias Cross, the shelter could be crushed as collateral. If she stayed quiet, she might save the roof over Ben's head but lose the one chance to change her life and theirs. That was the moral choice now, bigger and heavier than a lost wallet. Reed Lawson met her that afternoon at a small cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and wet wool. He looked tired, as if he had expected this escalation. "Your pendant was a key," Reed said, after Lila told him about the break-in. "Not just sentimental. Elias designed safeguards. That pendant's design isn't random. It matches a lock mechanism on a safe deposit box." Lila's throat tightened. "So whoever took it knew," she said. Reed nodded. "Or someone close to the Cross family knew," he said. Lila thought of Damian's eyes in the lobby, the sudden silence. She thought of Serena's shiny nails. She thought of Victor Hale, the Foundation's chief operations officer she'd seen speaking to Damian in the hallway, like a man who owned time. "Can you get it back?" she asked. Reed's jaw clenched. "I can try," he said, "but the people who want you quiet have money, and money buys patience." That night, the gala footage hit social media anyway. Serena posted a clip of Lila's shoes with laughing emojis and a caption about charity gone wrong. The comments were brutal. Fake sob story. Get a job. She's scamming. Lila read them on her cracked phone until her eyes burned. Then she tossed the phone on her bed like it had stung her. The next day, a man in a suit arrived at the shelter with a clipboard. "Code enforcement," he announced loudly, as if the kids were criminals. He inspected walls with a frown, tapped pipes like he wanted them to break, and wrote notes that felt like a sentence being drafted. Lila watched, hands clenched, and felt helpless in a way she hated. Then, at dusk, the shelter's front door opened, and Damian Cross stepped inside. No entourage, no cameras, just him in a dark coat, rain clinging to his hair. his expensive shoes wet on the cheap linoleum. He looked out of place under flickering fluorescent lights, like a painting hung in a laundry room. Everyone stared. Ben stared too, hiding behind Lila's elbow. Damian's eyes found Lila, and something in his face shifted. Less arrogance, more urgency. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue. When he opened his hand, Lila saw the silver pendant. Her pendant. The one stolen from her pillow. "I found this," Damian said, voice tight. "In Serena's bag." Lila's breath caught. That answered one question immediately. Serena was involved, but it raised another, sharper one. Why was Damian here bringing it back himself? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think I'm your enemy," he said. "Maybe I was." He swallowed, and it looked like it cost him. But Victor Hale just froze several shelter-linked accounts through a fraud review. He's not working for me anymore. He's working against both of us. Damian held the pendant out like an apology he didn't know how to speak. "If you want to save these kids," he said, eyes flicking to Ben, "you're going to need help. And whether you trust me or not, I'm the only person who can get you into the boardroom alive." Lila didn't take Damian's help because she trusted him. She took it because she trusted the math of power. And right now the numbers were stacked against an orphan girl with torn shoes and a cracked phone. Still, when Damian sat at the shelter's chipped kitchen table, surrounded by donated cereal boxes and mismatched mugs, he looked smaller than he had in the hotel, less like a king, more like a man who had been living inside a story someone else wrote. "Victor has been managing the Foundation's operational accounts for years," Damian admitted, staring at the steam rising from a mug he didn't drink. "My father trusted him. After my father died, Victor became essential." His jaw tightened, or so he made it seem. Lila's fingers curled around her pendant, feeling the scratches, the familiar grooves. "And Serena?" she asked. Damian's expression darkened. "Serena likes attention," he said. "Victor likes leverage." They found each other. Lila watched him carefully. The first open question was simple but dangerous. Was Damian telling the truth now, or was this just another form of control? The second question sat inside the pendant itself. What exactly did this necklace unlock? And what had Elias Cross hidden inside that safe deposit box? Reed met them later, arriving with a plain folder and a cautious gaze that didn't soften for Damian. "We have a lead," Reed said. "The pendant's design matches a lock at Halston National Bank. Elias set up a box under a trust name. To open it, we need the pendant and your presence, Ms. Hart." Lila's stomach twisted. "What if it's empty?" she asked. Reed shook his head. "Elias didn't do empty," he said. "He did contingency." They went the next morning. The bank smelled like cold air and old paper. A woman in a navy suit led them to a private room and placed a small metal box on the table. Lila's hands trembled as she held the pendant up to a recessed slot in the lid. It clicked softly like a secret agreeing to be told. Inside were three things: a flash drive, a sealed envelope addressed to Lila Hart in Elias's handwriting, and a tiny SIM card taped to a note that read, "For the phone that rings." Lila stared. Her cracked phone suddenly felt less like a cheap object and more like a planned doorway. Reed exhaled, relief and grief mixing in his face. "This is it," he murmured. Lila slid the envelope open with careful fingers and unfolded the letter. Elias's words were direct, almost blunt, but there was tenderness underneath, like a blanket pulled up in the dark. He wrote that he had watched her from a distance through trusted people. He wrote that her mother, Marion, had protected her at great personal cost. He wrote that certain records were sealed because truth attracts predators. And he wrote that Victor Hale had been siphoning funds from the foundation meant for shelters like St. Bridget's. "If Damian reads this," Elias wrote, "he will know I did not trust him yet. Not because I didn't love him, but because love is not proof." Lila's throat tightened as she read. Damian's face went pale, and for the first time Lila saw pain in him that didn't look performative. "He thought I'd become him," Damian whispered, voice rough. "A man who laughs at torn shoes." Lila didn't comfort him. She couldn't. Not yet. Noah, the quiet IT staffer from Cross Tower, who had reached out after seeing the online clip, joined them that evening in Reed's office. Noah had kind eyes and a mind that moved fast, like he was always solving something. "The Gala Diamond accusation," Noah said, tapping on his laptop. "I can pull corrupted footage and rebuild frames. If Victor cut the feed, he'll have left a digital bruise." Lila's hope was small but alive. They worked late. Noah isolated the moment the diamond donation supposedly disappeared. He found a brief flicker, a camera switching angles 1 second too early. "There," Noah said, pointing. A figure in a sleek dress moved near the display. Serena. A hand reached, not stealing the diamond but swapping it with something similar. A fake. Lila's chest tightened. "So she framed me," Lila whispered. Noah nodded. "And Victor used it to justify freezing accounts," he said. Reed leaned over the screen. "This is enough to confront the board," he said. Damian's jaw clenched. "Victor won't let us walk in with this," he said. Lila held the flash drive, feeling its lightness, its dangerous value. She thought about Ben. She thought about the eviction notice. "Then we don't walk in quietly," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. That answered one of her own questions. She didn't need to be perfect to be brave. She just needed to move. The board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Lila barely slept. When she arrived at Cross Tower with Reed and Damian, the lobby looked the same as before, shiny, untouchable, ready to swallow her again. A security guard approached, polite but firm. "Ms. Hart," he said, "Mr. Hale requests you wait in the anteroom." Before Lila could respond, another guard stepped behind her. The door closed. The room was windowless, furnished like a place where decisions were delayed until they died. Lila checked her phone. No signal. The SIM card was gone from its taped spot, missing. Her pulse spiked. Victor's voice came through a speaker in the ceiling, smooth as oil. "You're persistent, orphan girl," he said, "but persistence doesn't matter if no one hears you." Lila ran to the door and rattled it. Locked. Reed's voice was muffled outside, then cut off. Lila looked at the blank screen of her phone and felt the trap snap shut again. What if the truth never reached the board? And what if Victor's next move wasn't paperwork, but something that would finally break the shelter for good? Lila pressed her ear to the door until she heard footsteps fade. Her breath came fast, fogging the small glass panel. Panic rose, then fell, then rose again like a wave trying to drown her. Then she remembered something Elias had written in his letter, a line she hadn't understood until now. "When they take your voice, use theirs." She scanned the room with frantic eyes. There was a desk phone on the far wall, the kind with an internal extension label taped to it. Not her phone, not her number. But it was a line. Her hands shook as she picked it up and punched the only extension she remembered from Noah's email signature, 314. It rang once, twice, and then Noah's surprised voice answered. "Hello?" Lila almost cried with relief. "Noah," she whispered. "I'm locked in. Victor took my SIM. You have to get Reed the footage." "Stay on," Noah said quickly. "I'm tracing your line." Lila's heart hammered. That answered the first open question. She could still reach someone. She wasn't silenced completely. Minutes later, the door burst open. Damian stood there, breathing hard, his suit jacket rumpled as if he'd run. Behind him, Reed's face was tight with fury. "He tried to stall us," Reed said. Damian's eyes met Lila's, and for the first time his voice held something that sounded like shame. "I heard him call you orphan girl again," he said, "and I realized I was letting him use my name to do it." Lila didn't forgive him. But she nodded once because there was no time for feelings to lead. They stormed into the boardroom together. The room was long, glossy, full of men and women who wore power like perfume. Victor Hale sat at the far end, composed, hands folded, as if he had been waiting for this interruption. Serena sat beside him, face smooth, eyes bright with the thrill of drama. Several board members looked up, annoyed. Damian walked to the head of the table and didn't sit. "This meeting is not proceeding until you hear her," he said, voice hard. Victor smiled faintly. "Damian," he said, "you're emotional. Sit down." Reed placed the flash drive on the table like a weapon. "We have evidence of fraud," Reed said, "and we have the sealed codicil you all pretended didn't exist." Murmurs spread like wind through dry leaves. One board member, a woman with sharp glasses, frowned. "Codicil," she repeated. Victor's smile thinned. "Old documents," he said. "Irrelevant." Reed's voice didn't rise, but it cut. "Not irrelevant," he said. "Binding." He pulled out the sealed envelope that had been inside the safe deposit box. One Reed had not opened until this moment, because it required formal witness. He broke the seal in front of them, the sound small but decisive. "This is Elias Cross's final instruction," Reed said, "to the board and to his children." The room went still as Reed read aloud. Elias's words were steady, unmistakable. He wrote that Victor Hale had been entrusted with accounts and had betrayed that trust. He wrote that Serena Vale had been used as a distraction and had chosen to become a tool. He wrote that Damian Cross would inherit leadership only if he protected the Foundation's purpose, not its image. Then Reed reached the paragraph that made the air leave the room. "To the orphan girl," Reed read, and Lila's stomach clenched at hearing the phrase in Elias's handwriting, not as an insult, but as an acknowledgement of what she had survived. "To Lila Hart, child of Marion Hart, raised beyond the reach of those who would use her, I leave controlling interest in the Cross Foundation Trust until her 25th year, at which time she may choose the future leadership of this organization." A board member gasped. Another whispered, "Controlling interest?" Victor's composure cracked for the first time. "This is absurd," he snapped. "She's a nobody." Damian's voice cut across him like a blade. "She's not a nobody," Damian said. His hands trembled slightly, but he held his ground. "And you will not speak about her like that again." Lila felt the room spinning, not with dizziness, but with the sudden shift of gravity. The second open question she'd been carrying burst out inside her. Was Elias saying she was his daughter, or just his responsibility? Reed's next line answered it with devastating clarity. Elias wrote, Reed continued, that Marion Hart and he shared a child, and that he failed to protect Marion openly without endangering them both. He asks forgiveness from Lila for the secrecy that kept her safe, but kept him distant. Lila's vision blurred. She gripped the table edge to keep from falling. Damian's face went white, and something broke in his eyes. Not anger now, but grief. "A sister," he whispered, as if the word hurt to say. Victor stood abruptly. "This is a hostile takeover," he barked. "None of you can verify." Noah's voice came through the room's speaker system, calm and clear. "I can verify the theft frame-up," Noah said. Screens at the side of the boardroom lit up with footage. Serena's hand swapping the diamond. Victor speaking to a security tech. "Our timeline of account freezes. Emails, numbers, proof." Serena's lips parted, and for the first time she looked scared. One board member stood, furious. Another grabbed her phone. "Call legal," someone hissed. Victor's face twisted as the room turned on him. Reed didn't gloat. He simply said, "Authorities have been notified. Internal audits begin today." The moral justice landed with real consequences, not applause. Security approached Victor. He tried to protest, but the board's eyes were cold now. Serena rose, looking for an exit, and Damian didn't stop her. Lila stood in the center of it, heart pounding, and felt the strangest thing. Not victory, but the weight of being seen. The room that had tried to erase her was now listening. Damian turned to her slowly. "I mocked your shoes," he said, voice rough, and every eye stayed on him. "I mocked you because it was easy. Because I thought poverty was a costume people chose." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong." Lila's throat tightened. The board chair cleared her throat. "Miss Hart," she said carefully, "if this trust is valid, you now hold voting power. You can appoint leadership. You can demand reforms." The room waited for the orphan girl's choice like it was a verdict. Damian stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough that his voice could be private. "You can destroy everything with my name on it," he said. "Maybe you should, or you can let me help rebuild it the way my father wanted." Lila looked at the screens, at the evidence, at the stunned faces, and at Damian's bare, painful honesty. She felt the torn shoe on her foot, the old shame and the new power. What would justice look like? Revenge or repair? She opened her mouth to answer, and the room held its breath. Months later, the entrance to St. Bridget's shelter didn't smell like bleach first. It smelled like fresh paint and warm bread. The windows no longer whistled at night. The lights didn't flicker like they were tired. The eviction notice had been overturned, and not through a quiet payoff, but through public accountability that made the city ashamed to look away. The shelter had a new sign now, mounted above the doorway in simple letters, Hart House Community Home. Lila had insisted on that name, not because she wanted her name everywhere, but because Marion Hart had been real, had mattered, and had been erased too easily. Ben helped paint the letters, his tongue sticking out in concentration, his hands speckled with blue. Lila watched him and felt something like peace settle into her bones. She was still an orphan girl. That never changed, but she was no longer invisible. The Cross Foundation building also looked different, not in shape, but in spirit. There were new board members now, former foster youth educators, auditors who didn't smile too quickly. The scholarship program removed the guardian signature barrier and replaced it with support services for applicants without families. The first open question of this epilogue sat softly in the air. Could a system built by power actually learn humility? Lila didn't know if it could forever, but she knew it could be forced to start. Damian Cross no longer arrived like a storm. He arrived quietly, often alone, and he listened more than he spoke. He stepped down as CEO under board pressure and Elias's conditions, taking a role that made him accountable rather than untouchable. Some people called it punishment. Lila called it the beginning of a consequence that could become character if he chose it. The second open question was personal. Did Damian deserve forgiveness? Lila still didn't have a neat answer. Forgiveness wasn't a light switch. It was a road, and roads had potholes. But she had answered the biggest question on the day of the board meeting when she spoke into the silence and surprised herself with clarity. She chose repair with guardrails. She appointed an interim CEO chosen by an independent committee, and she made Damian serve under strict oversight, required to volunteer hours at partner shelters and report publicly on reforms. She didn't do it to be kind. She did it because justice wasn't only about taking. It was about protecting the people who would be hurt if the foundation collapsed overnight. That answer had cost her sleep, criticism, and the heavy work of staying steady while others tried to push her into extremes. She started college too, social policy and accounting, because she had learned that compassion without numbers could be stolen. On her first day of class, she wore a new pair of shoes. They were simple, sturdy, and fit her like a promise, but she didn't throw away the torn ones. Instead, she placed them in a small glass box in the entry hall of Hart House, beside a framed copy of her scholarship essay and a photo of Marion Hart's old children's home. Kids would stop and look at the shoes, confused at first. "Why keep broken shoes?" Ben asked one afternoon, tilting his head. Lila crouched beside him and tapped the glass gently. "Because those shoes carried me," she said. "And they carried you too, in a way. They remind us what we did for each other." Ben pressed his palm to the glass and smiled, as if he understood more than words. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Lila walked into the community room and found Damian sitting on the floor with a group of kids, helping them build a lopsided cardboard city for a school project. His sleeves were rolled up, tape stuck to his fingers, and one child had drawn a crooked crown on his hand in marker. Damian didn't notice Lila at first. When he did, he stood quickly, then stopped himself, remembering he didn't have to perform. "Hey," he said, voice quieter than it used to be. Lila nodded back. They weren't a fairy tale. They weren't a simple romance. But there was something new between them, respect earned through action, not image. Later, when the kids ran off to dinner, Damian lingered by the glass box of torn shoes. He didn't touch it. He only looked. "I used to think this kind of thing was weakness," he admitted. "Now I think it's proof." Lila's throat tightened. "Proof of what?" she asked. Damian's eyes stayed on the shoes. "Proof someone can be broken and still keep walking," he said. Lila's phone rang then, the same cracked phone she still kept even after she could afford a new one. The ringtone was the same thin chime that had cut through the marble lobby months ago, but now it didn't feel like shame. It felt like life calling her back to what mattered. She glanced at the screen. "Reed Lawson," she answered. "Miss Hart," Reed said, warmth in his voice for once. "The final trust transfer is complete. The documents are filed. No more seals. No more hiding." Lila closed her eyes, breathing out. That answered the lingering legal question. Her place in the truth was no longer fragile. She ended the call and turned toward the kitchen, where Ben was shouting happily about extra bread rolls. The torn shoes sat behind glass, no longer an object of ridicule, but a symbol of what the world had tried to measure her by, and what it had failed to understand. If you've ever been judged by something small, your shoes, your clothes, your address, what would you have wanted someone to see instead? And if you were the one holding power in your hands, what kind of justice would you choose? The kind that punishes or the kind that protects? If this story left you feeling something, share what you would have done in Lila's place, because sometimes the quiet choices tell us who we are louder than any mansion ever could.